The night market of Varun 9 was loud, cruel, and filled with the stench of greed. Lights from burning torches mixed with neon signs. The voices of aliens echoed in every corner, shouting, laughing, fighting to buy and sell lives. And in the center stood a stage made of black steel. It was not for music, not for art, but for selling living beings. The auctioneer, a tall alien with sharp teeth, hit the stage with his hammer. "Bring her out," he roared. Guards dragged a young alien girl from the shadows. Her wrists were chained, her steps weak, and her eyes full of fear. The cruelest part was that she had no clothes. Her body was displayed before a crowd of hungry eyes. Laughter broke out, sharp and merciless. Some shouted insults, some whistled, and others threw coins just to see her flinch. The girl's face turned pale. Her lips trembled, but she stayed silent. She had learned long ago that begging only brought more pain. Her people were gone, her family lost. Now she was just another item on a trader's list. "Look at this one," the auctioneer shouted. "Strong bloodline, rare beauty, perfect for work or for pleasure." The crowd roared with excitement. But when he announced the first price, silence fell because no one really wanted her. She was too thin, too broken, too useless in their eyes. "Worthless," one alien spat. "Not even fit for scraps," another laughed. The girl closed her eyes, wishing she could vanish into the ground. She thought maybe this was the end. Maybe no one would buy her. And maybe, just maybe, death would be kinder. But in the back of the crowd, a human stood quietly, his face half hidden by the shadow of his hood. He had been watching everything without a word. The aliens near him whispered, "What is a human doing here? They never buy from these auctions." But he didn't move, didn't react. His eyes stayed fixed on the trembling girl on the stage. The auctioneer grew angry. "No buyers? Are you all blind? Look at her!" He shoved the girl forward roughly, making her stumble. The crowd laughed louder. Still no one raised a hand. No one called a price, and then it happened. A calm voice cut through the noise. "I'll take her." Every head turned. The human had spoken, his voice steady, firm, without hesitation. Gasps spread across the market. "What? A human? Did he just bid on her? Impossible." The auctioneer blinked, unsure he had heard correctly. "You want her?" The human nodded slowly. "I'll pay more than your starting price," and with that, he threw a bag of credits onto the stage. The heavy sound of coins silenced the crowd. The girl's eyes opened in shock. She had expected nothing, no one. But here was a human choosing her. The auctioneer grinned. Greed winning over doubt sold. He shouted, slamming his hammer down. Laughter turned into murmurs, disbelief, and suspicion. Guards pushed the girl toward the human. She stumbled at his feet, still trembling, still exposed. And then something no one expected happened. The human removed his long coat without a word. He bent down and placed it gently over her shoulders, covering her body, covering her shame. The crowd froze. No one moved. No one laughed anymore. They had seen humans fight, seen them trade. But never an act of kindness like this in such a place. The girl's lips parted, her voice barely a whisper. "Why?" she asked, her eyes wide. The human didn't answer yet. He only held her arm carefully and helped her stand. Then he looked at the crowd, his gaze sharp, cold, dangerous. And in that silence, the aliens realized something. This was not just a buyer. This was a man who had come for a reason, and whatever that reason was, it would change everything. The torches crackled. The night air grew heavy. The girl clutched the coat around herself for the first time in years. She felt a strange warmth, not from the cloth, but from the human's choice, and deep inside her broken heart, a spark of hope flickered. Fragile but alive, the auctioneer, still smiling greedily, thought it was over. But the crowd's whispers told a different story. Why would a human protect her? This is not normal. Something is wrong here. And as the human led the girl away, eyes followed them, filled with suspicion, jealousy, and anger in that cruel marketplace. One act of mercy had started a storm, and soon, both the girl and the human would discover that the auction was only the beginning. The market was still buzzing, whispers chasing one another like restless insects. No one could believe what they had just seen. A human had raised his hand in an alien slave auction. And worse, he had paid real credits for a girl that every other bidder had rejected. The girl walked unsteadily at his side, wrapped in the long coat. Her chains still rattled with every step. She kept her head down, afraid that at any moment this kindness would break apart. She waited for him to speak cruel words to reveal the trick, but he was silent. His steps were calm, strong, and without hesitation. Behind them, the crowd's murmurs grew darker. "This isn't right," one alien growled. "No human does that," said another. "He must want her for some strange reason." The auctioneer's grin was wide, but even he felt uneasy. Something about this man didn't fit the usual picture of a buyer. The human finally stopped in front of the guards. "Remove her chains," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried weight. The guards blinked, confused. "No one pays extra for that," one guard said mockingly. "She is yours to control. What more do you want?" The human's eyes narrowed slowly. He reached into his belt and dropped 2 more silver coins into the guard's hand. "Remove them," he repeated. This time the guard hesitated, then obeyed. The chains clattered to the ground, and for the first time in years, the girl's wrists were free. Her breath caught in her throat. She touched her skin where the iron had bitten deep. It felt unreal, like a dream she would soon wake from. She whispered almost too softly to hear, "Why are you doing this?" The human finally looked at her. His face was calm, unreadable, but his words were steady. "Because no one deserves to be paraded in chains," he said. And then, as if it was the simplest truth in the universe, he turned away and guided her through the crowd. The silence around them was heavy. Aliens stepped aside, watching with wide eyes. No one dared block their path, not because of fear of his weapon, he had shown none, but because of something else. There was a weight in his presence, a quiet danger that made even the boldest traders step back. But danger was never far in a market like this. From the shadows, voices whispered, "He humiliated us. He thinks he is better than us. Take her back. She should have been ours." Jealousy and anger spread like poison, and in the dark corners of the market, rough hands reached for blades. The girl felt the shift in the air. Her senses, sharpened by years of survival, screamed a warning. She looked at the human beside her. He walked without fear, but she saw the slight turn of his head. He knew, too, he was ready. As they reached the exit gate, a group of 3 aliens blocked the way, heart-scarred with eyes like wolves. "Leaving so soon, human?" One hissed, "Why don't you leave the girl behind? She belongs with her kind." The girl froze, her body trembling. This was it, she thought. He would abandon her now. He had bought her for show, nothing more. No one risked fighting slavers in the open. But the human didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his hand not reaching for a weapon. Instead, his voice cut the air like a blade. "She belongs with no one," he said. "She walks free or she walks with me." "Move aside," the aliens snarled, baring their teeth. Crowds gathered again, hungry for blood. A fight in the market was entertainment. The girl's heart pounded. She wanted to scream, to beg him not to fight, but her voice was locked inside her chest. The first alien lunged, but the human moved faster than anyone expected. With a swift step and a strike, he knocked the alien to the ground. The second came with a knife. The human twisted his wrist. The blade clattered onto the dirt. The third, larger than the rest, hesitated for a moment. He looked into the human's eyes and saw something that made him step back. Not fear, not rage, but a deadly calm. A warning that this man was no ordinary buyer. The crowd erupted into chaos, some cheering, some cursing, but the human didn't wait. He turned, placed a steady hand on the girl's shoulder, and guided her out of the gate behind them. The voices of anger grew louder. This was not finished. The traders would not forget this insult. The girl walked quickly, clutching the coat tighter around herself. Her voice finally broke free. Soft and shaking, "You risked everything. For me," she whispered. "Why?" The human glanced at her for a moment. Something flickered in his eyes, something heavy, something personal. But all he said was, "No one should be broken for others' amusement." The girl stared at him, confused. She had met many buyers, many masters, but this one was different. Different in a way she could not yet understand. Above them, the night sky stretched wide, stars shining cold and distant. Yet for the first time, the girl felt a warmth inside her chest. It was fragile, dangerous, but it was hope. And hope was something the slavers could never chain again. The night outside the slave market was cold, the kind that cut through skin and bone. The girl shivered under the heavy coat the human had given her. It was warm, yes, but more than warmth, it carried his scent. The smell of smoke and iron. Every step she took felt unreal, like walking through a dream she was afraid to wake from. Behind them, the sounds of the market still echoed. Shouts, laughter, the clash of anger. The traitors would not forget, she knew that. No one humiliated them in front of a crowd and walked away without consequence. But for now, she was outside those cruel walls. For the first time in years, the air tasted like freedom. The human led her through narrow streets. He did not speak, did not even look back to check if she was following. Yet his hand occasionally reached out, steady and firm, guiding her whenever she stumbled. He never pulled, never forced, only supported. The small gestures confused her more than the coat. Kindness was not something she understood anymore, finally. They reached a quiet courtyard where shadows stretched long under the pale moon. The human stopped and turned to her. "You're safe here," he said, his voice calm but sharp, as if daring the night itself to argue. Safe, she thought, the word almost meaningless. Safe was something that had been stolen from her long ago. She wrapped the coat tighter around her body. "Why do you keep saying that?" she whispered. "Safe does not exist for someone like me." The human studied her, his eyes deep and unreadable. Then, without a word, he knelt and pulled a small pack from his belt. Inside was cloth, water, and a thin blanket. He spread the blanket on the ground. Motioning for her to sit, she hesitated, unsure, but finally lowered herself onto it. Her legs trembled from exhaustion, her throat dry from fear. He poured water into a small cup and handed it to her. Her hand shook so badly she almost spilled it. But he didn't laugh, didn't scold. Instead, he placed his own hand around hers to steady it. The simple touch was like fire, not burning, but awakening something inside her. She drank slowly, every drop a reminder she was still alive. When she finished, her voice cracked. "You could have left me, like the others," she said. Her eyes searched his face, desperate for an answer. He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze on the stars above. Then finally he said, "Because no one deserves to be broken before strangers." His words were steady, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. Pain, maybe memory, something unspoken that weighed on him. The girl lowered her head, clutching the coat tighter. Her heart wanted to believe him, but her mind whispered old truths. Kindness was a trick. Safety was a lie. Hope was dangerous. Still, the coat was real, the water was real, and his steady presence was real. She dared to whisper, "What will you do with me now?" The human looked at her directly. His expression did not change, but his voice was firm. "Do with you?" "Nothing," he said. "You are free to walk away, but if you stay, I will make sure no one chains you again." The words struck her harder than any whip. "Free," he said, as if freedom could simply be handed back like a lost coin. Tears burned her eyes, unexpected, unwanted. She turned her face away so he wouldn't see, but her shoulders shook, betraying her. For so long she had been treated as nothing more than a body, a thing to be sold, used, discarded. Now this human spoke to her as if she still had worth. It was unbearable, and yet beautiful. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of a small fire he had started. The warmth touched her skin, chasing away the night's chill. She sat closer without realizing it, drawn not just to the fire, but to the strange shield of peace that seemed to follow him. Far in the distance, the howls of angry traitors echoed through the streets. The girl flinched, fear twisting her stomach. "They will come," she whispered. "They will never let this go." The human's jaw tightened, his eyes cold as steel. "Then let them come," he said. His hand rested lightly on the hilt of a hidden blade. Not boasting, not loud, just certain, and for the first time, she believed him. Wrapped in his coat, warmed by the fire, the girl slowly leaned her head against the wall, exhaustion pulling at her. Her body gave in before her mind could argue. Sleep came like a thief, but not the cruel kind. This was gentle, almost merciful. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was simple. Maybe I am not worthless after all. The human watched as her breathing steadied. He kept his eyes on the shadows beyond the courtyard. He knew danger was near, but his hand rested calmly on the blade. He had carried burdens heavier than this before, and tonight he had chosen to carry her too. As the moon rose higher, the girl slept wrapped in kindness, and the human kept watch, silent, steady, unyielding, like a wall between her and the world that had broken her. The girl woke to the sound of footsteps, soft but too many to be harmless. Her eyes snapped open. The fire had burned low, and the night smelled of danger. The human was already awake. Standing at the edge of the courtyard, his hand rested lightly on the hilt of his blade, his body still but alert like a hunter. "They've come," he said calmly, as if he had been expecting it all along. The girl pushed herself up, clutching the coat tighter around her thin frame. Her heart raced, her throat dry. She remembered the angry eyes at the market, the whispers of revenge. They hadn't been lies. Slavers never let their property go without a fight. From the shadows, rough voices echoed. "There he is. The fool who thought he could steal from us," another voice snarled. "The girl belongs to the chains. Return her, human, and we may let you live." The girl froze, every muscle in her body screaming to run. But the human did not move back, did not even raise his weapon yet. Instead, he spoke with calm authority. "She was never yours," he said, "and if you value your lives, you will walk away now." The slavers laughed. The sound cruel and sharp. One stepped forward, his skin scarred, his eyes glowing red in the dark. "You dare challenge us, human? You think your little coat makes her free? No, she will crawl again." The girl's chest tightened, the weight of fear pressing down. She whispered, "You should leave me, please, before they kill you." But the human turned his head just enough for her to see his eyes. "Chains are for breaking," he said simply. And then the fight began. The slavers lunged from every side, blades flashing under the moonlight. The human moved like water, flowing yet sharp. His blade sang as it cut through the first attacker's weapon, shattering it in sparks. With a twist, he sent the alien crashing into the dirt. Another swung from behind, but the human ducked low, driving his shoulder into the alien's chest. The sound of bones cracking echoed in the night. The girl stumbled back, watching with wide eyes. She had seen fights before, slaves against masters, weak against strong, but this was different. The human fought not like a desperate man, but like one who had already decided he would not lose. Every strike was precise, every move controlled. It was as if the darkness itself bent around him. Still, there were too many. More shadows spilled into the courtyard. More blades flashing, the girl cried out, "Behind you!" The human spun just in time, blocking a strike that would have cut his back open. The force drove him to one knee, but he pushed upward with a roar. The attacker flew backward into a wall, crumbling in pain. Blood stained the dirt, the smell of iron filling the air. The girl pressed herself against the wall, trembling. Part of her wanted to run, to escape into the alleys and vanish, but her legs refused to move. Because something inside her whispered that leaving him would be worse than chains. The fight dragged on, but slowly the slavers realized the truth. They were not fighting a simple buyer. They were fighting a human who carried something heavier than fear. His blade dripped, his breathing steady, his eyes burning like fire, and one by one, the slavers began to retreat. "This is not worth it," one hissed, clutching his wounded arm. "He's not human, he's a monster," another spat as they fled into the shadows. Silence fell over the courtyard, broken only by the crackle of the dying fire. The human lowered his blade, wiping the blood with a rag. His coat still hung around the girl's shoulders, untouched. She realized he had fought an entire pack of killers and never once let her out of his sight. Her voice shook as she whispered, "You could have died. For me." He looked at her, his face unreadable but his words firm. "You were already dying the moment they put you on that stage," he said. "I only gave you back what was stolen." Her hands trembled as she touched the coat. It was heavy, not just with fabric but with meaning. She felt her throat tighten, her chest ache. For years she had been nothing but property. Yet tonight, one human had chosen to fight the world just so she could breathe as a person. But there was no time to rest. The human glanced at the broken gate, his eyes narrowing. "They will return with more," he said. "We must leave this place before dawn." The girl nodded weakly, her body shaking from fear and exhaustion. But this time, when she stood closer to him. As if the coat around her shoulders was not enough, she needed the shield of his presence too. Together they slipped into the empty streets. The city lights glowed in the distance, but every shadow felt alive. Every alley whispered danger. The girl walked quickly, her bare feet silent against the stone, her mind still heavy with questions she dared not ask. Why had he done this? Why her, of all the countless slaves in the market? And most of all, how long could one human fight against an entire world that wanted her chained again? The night swallowed them as they disappeared into the labyrinth of streets. The coat around her shoulders was still warm, but deeper than that warmth was the fragile spark in her chest, a spark that whispered, maybe, just maybe, this human could keep her free. The city was far behind them now, its cruel lights hidden by the thick forest that stretched into the hills. The girl followed the human along a narrow path, the night air filled with the sound of insects and the rustle of leaves. She clutched his coat tightly, every step painful on her bare feet. But she did not complain. For the first time in years, no one dragged her by chains. No one shouted orders at her. She was walking free, though her mind still refused to believe it. When they finally stopped, the human chose a small clearing near a stream. He built a fire quickly, his hands moving with practiced ease. The flames lit his face, shadows dancing in his eyes. The girl sat across from him, silent, her knees pulled to her chest under the coat. The warmth of the fire reached her body, but inside she was still cold. Memories of the market, of chains, of humiliation, pressed on her like heavy stones. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The human sharpened his blade with slow strokes. His focus steady, the girl stared at the fire, her thoughts a storm she could no longer hold back. Finally, her voice broke the silence, soft and trembling. "Do you want to know what I was before they sold me?" The human looked up, his eyes meeting hers across the flames. He did not answer immediately, only nodded once. She took a shaky breath, her fingers digging into the coat as if it could keep her from falling apart. "I was the daughter of a farmer," she whispered. "My people lived on the outer colonies. Far from the Empire's wars, we grew food, we traded with travelers, we sang songs under the stars. It was simple, it was enough. Until the raiders came." Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to continue. "They came at night, their ships burning the sky. We had no weapons, no soldiers, only hands that knew the soil. They killed those who resisted. They burned our fields, and those of us they spared. They chained. I was only 14 when they dragged me from my mother's arms." Tears slipped down her cheeks. Shining in the firelight, she did not wipe them away. "They sold me again and again, each time to someone crueler than the last. I learned to be silent, to keep my eyes down, because every time I spoke I was punished, every time I hoped, it was crushed." Her voice grew faint. "At the last place they said I was no use anymore. Too thin, too weak, not worth feeding. So they sent me to the market, to stand on that stage with nothing but shame, and wait for someone to decide if I lived or died." Her shoulders shook, her tears falling freely now. "I thought no one would buy me. I prayed no one would, because then maybe death would be quick." The human listened without interrupting. His hands had stilled, the blade resting against his knee. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with quiet fire. When she finally lowered her head, exhausted by the weight of her words, he spoke, his voice steady and low. "They tried to erase you," he said. "They tried to break you into nothing, but you are still here. Breathing, speaking, fighting to remember. That means they failed." The girl lifted her head, staring at him through wet eyes. "No," she whispered. "I am nothing. Just broken pieces." The human leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "You are not nothing," he said firmly. "You are alive, and that alone makes you stronger than they will ever be." His words struck her like a blade, not cutting her down, but carving space inside her chest, space where something unfamiliar could grow. She had not realized how starved she was, not for food, but for someone to see her, to speak to her as if she mattered. Her lips trembled. "Why do you care?" she asked. The human looked into the fire, his jaw tightening for a moment. She thought he would stay silent, but then he spoke, his voice carrying weight of his own scars. "Because I have seen chains too," he said. "Different than yours, but chains all the same. I watched people I loved taken. I could not save them then, so now when I see someone in chains, I will not walk away." The girl's breath caught. There was pain in his voice, buried deep, not spoken in detail, but heavy enough to silence her. She realized he carried wounds of his own, wounds that made his kindness not weakness, but defiance. The fire crackled, the night air cool around them. The girl pulled the coat tighter, not from cold, but from the fragile safety it gave her. For the first time since her world had burned, she spoke words she thought she'd never say. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was small, but it carried every piece of her broken past, and for the first time the words did not feel useless. The human gave a single nod, nothing more. But the girl saw something soften in his eyes. Not pity, not ownership, something else. Something closer to respect. The night stretched on, the forest around them alive with unseen creatures. But by the fire in that small clearing, two broken souls sat across from each other, one learning how to speak again, the other learning how to listen. And though danger still hunted them, the girl felt a fragile seed take root inside her. Not yet strong, not yet safe, but alive. Hope. The first light of dawn touched the forest. Pale and cold, mist curled low along the ground. Wrapping the trees in silence, the girl sat close to the fire. the human's coat still around her shoulders, but her eyes never left the shadows between the trees. She could feel it. Danger pressing closer, the night's peace had been only borrowed time. The human stood at the edge of the clearing. Scanning the horizon, he moved with quiet confidence, but even he could not hide the tension in his shoulders. When she whispered, "They're coming, aren't they?" He didn't deny it. "They'll hunt us until one of us falls," he said simply. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. The girl's stomach twisted. She had known slavers all her life. They were cruel, patient, and merciless. They would not forget being shamed in front of the entire market. They would not forgive losing property, and most of all, they would never forgive being defied by a human. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the forest. The human's hand went instantly to his blade. Birds scattered from the trees as shadows moved among the mist. The girl's breath caught. Figures were closing in from every direction. Dark shapes, armored, their weapons glinting in the weak morning light. The slavers had returned, but not as a mob. This time they came like hunters, disciplined, organized, silent. They had learned from last night's failure. Now they came prepared. The human's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward, placing himself between the girl and the approaching shadows. His voice was low but firm. "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." Her hands shook, but she nodded, clutching the coat tighter. Her heart screamed to run, but her legs refused. Something inside her refused to leave him. The first arrow sliced through the mist. The human deflected it with his blade in a burst of sparks. Then another and another. Silent death from the trees. He moved like lightning, shielding her with his body. But the numbers were growing. The forest itself seemed to close in around them. The slavers stepped into view at last. At least 20 of them, their armor dark, their faces twisted with hate. At their front stood a leader taller than the rest. His horns curled like a beast, his voice booming through the mist. "You should have left her. Human," he snarled. "You could have lived. But now both of you belong to the dirt." The girl's blood turned cold. She recognized him, the one who had first dragged her onto the auction stage. His eyes burned with fury, his pride wounded by the human's defiance. Her whole body trembled, the memory of his hand striking her flashing in her mind. She wanted to scream, to vanish, but the human's calm voice broke through her terror. "Step closer, and you'll find the dirt belongs to you instead." The slavers laughed. Cruel and confident, they began to circle, their blades ready. The girl felt panic rising, her chest tight, her breaths shallow. "We can't fight them all," she whispered desperately. The human glanced at her, his expression calm. "Then we don't fight them all," he said. "We fight until the rest remember fear." His words didn't make sense, yet they steadied her, because in his voice there was no doubt, no hesitation, no weakness, only the certainty of a man who had chosen his path long ago. The leader roared, "Take them!" The slavers surged forward, blades flashing in the dawn light. The human moved, his blade carving through the mist with deadly grace. One attacker fell, then another, their cries echoing through the trees. The girl backed against the fire, her hands pressed to her chest, every sound, every clash of metal felt like thunder in her ears. But even as the human cut them down, more poured in. She saw sweat bead on his forehead. His breaths growing heavier still, he did not falter. Every strike was precise, every step unyielding. It was as if he carried the weight of something greater than his own life. The leader stepped forward at last, his massive axe raised high. The ground shook as he brought it down. The human blocked with both hands, the clash of steel and iron sending sparks across the clearing. The girl cried out, fear ripping through her chest. But the human gritted his teeth and pushed back. The two locked in a deadly struggle, strength against strength, will against will. The slavers cheered, certain their leader would crush the human. But in the human's eyes burned something different. Not anger, not fear. Resolve. A fire that no chain, no market, no army could extinguish. The girl watched, her heart pounding, and in that moment she understood. He wasn't just fighting for her body or her freedom. He was fighting to prove something, to himself, to the universe, that no one had the right to break another soul. The clash of blade and axe rang out again. The leader snarled, the human roared, and as sparks flew, the girl whispered through her trembling lips, "He will not fall." For the first time she believed it. The forest clearing shook with the clash of steel. The human and the slaver leader locked in a brutal struggle. Axe against blade, strength against will. The girl pressed herself against the tree line, every nerve screaming with fear, but her eyes stayed fixed on him, on the one man who had refused to let her remain a slave. The slaver leader snarled, his muscles straining. "You can't win, human. You're only one against many." The human's blade trembled under the weight of the axe, but his voice was steady, sharp as the steel in his hands. "One is enough," he growled. With a surge of strength, he twisted. Forcing the axe aside, the slaver stumbled, unprepared for the sudden shift, and the human struck, his blade flashing across the morning light. The leader fell with a roar that shook the trees. Blood darkened the earth beneath him. The watching slavers froze, their confidence shattered. The girl's breath caught in her throat. She had seen cruelty all her life, but she had never seen fear on the faces of slavers. Not until now. The human straightened, his blade dripping, his chest heaved with breath, but his eyes burned with fire. He turned toward the circle of enemies. His voice cut the silence. "Who's next?" The words rang like thunder. The remaining slavers exchanged glances, their courage crumbling. One dropped his weapon, then another, and in moments they fled into the forest, vanishing like shadows chased away by the dawn. The clearing fell silent. Only the crackle of the dying fire and the soft whisper of the stream remained. The human lowered his blade, wiping it clean. Then he turned to the girl, his expression calm. "It's over," he said. The girl's knees gave way, tears flooding her eyes. Not from fear this time, but from release. Her body shook with sobs she had buried for years. The human crossed the clearing, his step steady, without a word. He draped the coat more firmly around her and knelt at her side. She clutched the fabric, her voice trembling. "Why? Why do you keep saving me?" The human's gaze softened, though his tone remained firm. "Because no one deserves to live in chains," he said. "And because I choose to." The word struck her deeper than any blade. Choice. No one had ever given her that word before. She had been told what to do, where to go, who to serve, but now, someone had chosen her, not as property, not as a tool, but as a life worth protecting. Slowly she wiped her tears, her voice a fragile whisper. "Then let me choose too." The human tilted his head slightly, waiting. "I choose to walk with you," she said. Her voice cracked, but her eyes were steady. "I don't want to be left behind again." The human studied her for a long moment. Then with a single nod, he stood and offered his hand. She hesitated only a heartbeat before placing her own trembling hand in his. His grip was firm, steady, unyielding, and for the first time, her steps felt like her own. Together they left the clearing. The rising sun painted the sky in gold and crimson. Every step away from the battlefield felt like a step into something new. The girl clutched the coat tighter, not because she needed its warmth anymore, but because it reminded her of the moment her life had changed. The forest thinned, giving way to open fields. Birdsong filled the air, sweet and gentle. She breathed deeply, the air sharp and clean. It felt like the first breath of her true life. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Maybe freedom is real after all." The human glanced at her, his expression unreadable, but in his eyes, she thought she saw the faintest spark of a smile. "Freedom is real," he said quietly. "You only need the courage to keep it." Her heart swelled. Fragile but strong. For so long she had believed she was nothing. But now she walked beside someone who saw her as more. Not a slave, not a burden, but a person. The road stretched before them. Long and uncertain, but for the first time, she did not fear it. The chains were gone, the market was behind her, and ahead was a new beginning. The girl looked up at the sky. The rising sun warmed her face, and she whispered a vow. "I will never go back." The human heard her, and though he said nothing, his hand rested briefly on her shoulder. Firm and reassuring, they walked on in silence, two souls scarred by the past but bound together by the choice to defy it. And as the forest gave way to the open world, the girl stepped forward not as a slave, not as property, but as someone reborn, and beside her the human walked steady, a quiet guardian of her new beginning.